Welcome back to another episode of Across the Room with Kingstide. I'm Cole, and today I'm joined with Mena.
What's up, everyone?
Mena is a friend of mine. I met her this past year. She's been great to do ministry alongside. Do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what some of your hobbies are?
This question's always hard. Where am I from? Majority of where I grew up is California. So Southern Cali girl. I am in full-time ministry. Get to do like half of the year in Africa. Really involved with my church here. Hobbies. I'm like, weird hobbies I have. I love to read. I probably can finish like 4 books in a week. No, I love it. And I fully admit I am a nerd. And love walks, love friends, love coffee, love a coffee shop. I think those things are all incredible things together. But yeah, a little bit about me. And then we'll go into more details as we start.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this is another episode of the Testimony Tuesdays. Have Mena on to share her testimony, obviously. Mena, I've mentioned it to you before, but to tell all the listeners, I like to go from the past to the present to the future. Hear how the Lord has sought after you, found you throughout your life, and just with the hope of bringing glory to his name as other people listen and can find hope in what the Lord is doing. Yeah. So we can start with your past.
Perfect.
You can tell us a little bit about your upbringing, what the family life was like growing up, anything like that.
Let's go. Okay, so I was born in Ethiopia, Africa. Born, my birthday is still not a hardcore set date. I have like 2 different ones, but I have one legal one, but it's probably not the right one. But yeah, born as of we know, January 31st, 2001 in Ethiopia. I was adopted when I was 6 years old, and from like 0 to 6, that much of my life is like not really known. I've always had like pictures in my head, but you realize how much growing up, like how much your parents tell you the stories that like help build these memories that I just don't have. But yeah, so was born in Ethiopia. Had a mom, had a dad. I've always had a picture of them in my head, and then had a brother and sister. But like I said, it's not anything that can be factually proven, but it's just, I've always seen those pictures. And even right when I was adopted, told my now adopted parents like these stories. From what we do know is lost my parents at a young age. In African culture, kids, you really have kids to help work and to help do things. And so my aunt took us in, but just me being really young and not being able to help, I was put in an adoption. Was only there for a really short amount of time until I was picked up for adoption. And so on the American side, my parents had 3 kids by this time, and a ton of their friends and like in their community were adopting from this one specific agency. And so they're like, we want to adopt. And something my dad always like grew up saying was like, I wanted 2 kids, your mom wanted 4, but like the Lord was like, let's have 6. And so they had 3, and they just decided like, why not get a boy and a girl at the same time? And it's for something I feel like as big as a deal as that is, you just kind of pick who you want of like, I want this girl and I want this boy. And then you start the process. And so I was picked to be adopted when I was 4 years old. So in the orphanage I was in, it was definitely like government funded, because I wasn't like too bad off, and just we had all that we needed. But I would spend now 2 years waiting for my parents. So I was adopted, air quotes, at 4, but I wouldn't meet them until I was 6. And so probably about 2 months before my parents were coming to Africa, I was transferred to the orphanage that my brother Lul was at, not biologically related, but we were going to be adopted together. And, Cole, my personality, I was just such an excited person. So I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be siblings. But it is a weird concept, because you're like, okay, don't know you.
Yeah.
And so I just remember my brother Lul, like just being like, calm down, relax. But I was just so excited. No, literally, like, just met you. But it is a weird thing. And the day I was actually taken to that orphanage is a very vivid memory for me. But I had like, my parents had been sending me like care packages and stuff like that at that point. And the orphanage I did go to, like where my parents were going to pick us up, where Lul was at, that one was like, I feel like what you would picture is like an African orphanage. But I wasn't there too long. And that was, like I said, weirdly like a really lonely season. And I think it rooted a lot of the rejection I feel like I walked in, just because like pictures of even the lady who dropped me off, I can always picture her leaving, and just going into a place that I was like, from that moment on, no one knows you, you know. But yeah, so was there only for about 2 months, and then my parents came. I remember that day really vividly too, just like you're so excited, and the things they tell you about America, it's just like you're gonna go to Disneyland all the time. You're like, it's such made up stuff that you're just like, where do we come up with this? But you're also like, it's a weird concept that you're like, I'm literally moving and like flights and distance isn't even a reality to you because you've kind of just stayed in your place. So to be like, you're getting on a plane for the first time, and like, I know this is like, we've seen white people here and there, but to actually like, they're going to be your parents. And so remember like waking up early, they get you ready. And I was just like sitting, waiting in anticipation. And they didn't come yet. So we took a nap. And then when I was woken up, it was because like my dad was there. And we have a picture of me meeting him for the first time. If you ever see my dad, he's like 6'4", greatest mustache you've ever seen, but like just, you know, nothing I've ever seen. And it's like him picking me up, and I'm just like studying his face, just like, who the heck are you? What's going on? And you know, and like, because it is a concept of like, this is it, like this is your family. And my parents came, they already had 3 biological kids at this point, so 2 girls and a boy, and then we're adopting 1 girl and a boy. And so all of them came together, and it was so fun, and you got to stay there for 2 weeks. And so it was just like slowly transitioning you, so you would stay with them but like come back to the orphanage little by little, and that time flew by. They have a little party for you. You're just getting to know that your parents, and like I said, I was excited. Like I would love to like go back to really talk, but there was no like sadness until like the last day. But it wasn't even like, oh, I'm leaving. And something about my parents, I think you can just quickly see, is just like they really love the Lord, and it just came out. And so just like, yeah, really connected with my siblings and with my parents. And obviously you're speaking a language also. So like having Lul there was like really great. But even girls are always going to get way more stuff when you get care packages. And so there was a bunch of stuff I got that like Lul didn't get. And so he'd always like take my clothes or like my shoes. We literally have this picture where we were hiking, and he literally has this pink shoes on, and he made me wear slippers, and I was so mad at him. But yeah, it was just a really sweet time. And then when we left, I remember that being a hard day, because you're just like going to very much an unknown place that you have no idea, and you're leaving like everything you knew. But I feel like for me too, I walked through that the 2 months previous, because the place I was at, I didn't know anyone. I really only knew Lul. And so I feel like I got to walk through it before. So I was just like, I was ready to go. And then a really cool part of our story too, while my parents were there, when they were picking us up, they met a little boy named Ephraim. He was 2 at that point, and my mom just like fell in love with him and was like, let's get him. And my dad was like, no. Like, we just did this, you know, for 2 years of our life. Like, what are you doing? And he had a mom. And so they were like, oh, he has a mom, so like he's not even up. But something in my mom just like really pulled. But yeah, so I'll carry that story later. But so we would go to America. And yeah, just transitioned really well. My mom was a school teacher, so that helped like learning the language, and they put us in school for about 6 months to a year to just like help us be around it. But after that point, I was homeschooled, and just my mom became my teacher, and it was the best thing. Just really grew up in a home that like family was really important, and learned a lot, and really had an awesome community of people. Friends were never something I like ever struggled meeting, and in the homeschool community too, it's just like everyone does everything together. So like all the parties are together, you do school together, you do field trips together. But I did lose my language like pretty quickly on, probably had it for a few years, but then Lord decided like, I'm not speaking it anymore. And then there was nobody else to talk to. And so lost it pretty quick, but it was awesome to grow up in a community that a lot of our family friends had adopted from that agency. So I grew up with people that I had known in Africa, which made it just fun. And so we would do Ethiopia holidays together, and stuff like that.
In California, there was other Ethiopians.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so even like literally right in our neighborhood, there was siblings who came from the exact orphanage that like Lul really and I started. And there was a whole group of them. And so like, we're not as close obviously now, but it did help with the transition, because it was just like that. is so rare, to be adopted with that many people in that such concentrated space. And it really helped, I think, all of us also grow together, because you're going to walk through things that just feel you can't really explain. And now there's people who understand it. But yeah, and so then about us being there for about 2 years, my parents would get a call, and the mom of Ephraim was willing to put him up for adoption. And so at that point, I don't think you could really be like, no, because of just how much the Lord had worked in that year. And so they went through that process again, and went back to get him. And he really completes our family. So it's so crazy to think that he was not the plan, but obviously in the Lord's eyes he was. And he's our one sibling too, who has a picture with his mom. And so yeah, they went back, and that time just my mom and my sisters, we almost were gonna go, but it was just still too soon. And so it's I think to go back into a place that was hard to leave. But yeah, he came, and that would then just complete. After that, my parents were like, okay, we're really done.
There's the 6.
Yeah, so it ended with the 6, and I'm right in the middle. So I feel like I have traits of an older sibling, just because of my 2 younger brothers, and there are age gaps between us, but very much traits of a baby girl, because of how I was treated in my family, just really loved, and really loved by my dad. Parents who had a really beautiful marriage, really loved the Lord. They didn't grow up in homes that really knew the Lord. My mom kind of did. My grandma really, really loved Jesus. But they met in high school right off the bat, knew they were supposed to be together, got married when they were young. And so just had made everything they ever had was really from the Lord. So I just grew up in a home that we all really served. We were a part of it. And so in learning all of that, I think I just was around a lot of Jesus, and just kind of makes you think I'm saved. But that was one thing my parents were just you're not, just because we are. And so when I was 10 is when I vividly remember we did a little game during the holidays. It was December 19th, 2010, which through the whole game, you pretty much are asking the question of what does Jesus want for Christmas? And at the end, it's you, and then you hear the gospel story. And I remember just being wrecked by it. And I was oh, wait, I want that. And I remember my dad was gone, and I called him, because I was Dad, I got saved. And it was just such a really real time for me. And so, yeah, that's been the cool part, I think, about growing up in that young season, from being adopted to even when I was 10, I was aware of so much at a young age, but also lived a very joyful, happy life. Like I said, just really great parents, a dad who provided, a dad who was there, a mom who provided, a mom who was there, which I think helps any kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to pause and stuff like that for questions, or just keep going.
Yeah, just keep going. I do want to ask, so growing up from the time you're in America and so forth, growing up in the church the whole time.
Yeah.
What was it like? Was there any stepping stone towards the moment of December 19, 2010?
Yeah.
Or was it just kind of that it just happens?
Yeah. No, for sure. We, like I said, in us being involved in our church the way we were, and I grew up in a church in Southern California that our students ministry was incredible, and didn't only teach you the Bible stories, but walk through scripture with you, and you were allowed to serve at, in 5th grade. And so they just really helped you actually as in what you would do as an adult, to study scripture, to be a part. And you had Sundays, and then you had, Wednesdays, and even being homeschooled, all the programs we were part of were Christian programs. So I was just really immersed with the Lord. But I also had parents who were really good about just because if you can't tell, I can just talk a lot and ask so much questions. And so even them answering for me. But yeah, I think I loved the church I grew up in, just because it was such a home, but it became a place I really learned. And all my leaders from when I was in elementary school to junior high to high school, really poured into me, and really just walked with me, and kind of Seacoast does it, but a little different, but just you had your same teacher and same group, but our big message was always it was a good amount. And even by the time we got into high school, high schoolers were sitting within an hour messages, just because it's you can intake it. And if you can't, we can talk about other things, But yeah, like it was incredible to grow up, I think, into a church. And one of the things we also did was a thing called Swordsman, where you're memorizing passages, and you would start in first grade and go all the way into sixth grade. But by the time you're in sixth grade, you're memorizing like whole chapters, and you're doing it every week. And so it just became a place where like really intaking scripture, and that really, I realized as I've grown up and just even getting to do ministry now and missions now, how much I hadn't even realized that like the biblical foundation had been built naturally, just because I think I grew up in a non-denominational church, but believed in like the Holy Spirit and stuff like that. But it was so just biblical. And it wasn't until I was older and just kind of like just realizing like there are denominations and like there's different beliefs, because it felt like for me, I'm like, just read scripture and you'll get it.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that's really not everybody. And growing up in the West Coast too, it's so different than what it is here, where there are, I think denominations are really big here. But like I said, just growing up in a non-denominational church where the Bible was just so important. But because that was important, it actually allowed like the Holy Spirit to be important. But like knowing like same things I think we can struggle with, like Baptists this, but like charismatics this, and like I think there's place for all of it, and so that's what I was really grateful for, because I didn't realize I was actually building that foundation. And so church has always been a place of healing for me. It's never been something I've ever struggled with. It's always been a place I could ask questions to, like, because I'm a question person. I'm never usually going to take what you just say just to take it. And I always had pastors who were like, okay, sure, like let's keep going, let's dive in, and people poured into me. So yeah, man,
that's awesome. And it's cool to hear how a church would feed scripture for you. The Swordsman program sounds absolutely awesome.
It was literally so incredible.
I haven't heard of that ever. And it seems that today we are in a culture that is very biblically unversed. So it's awesome to hear how that church was against the grain on that.
Yeah.
So after December 19th, 2010, I remember the date.
Get it.
Is You mentioned how the church, it's the youth program, and being able to be fed and taught, and a lot to intake from them. What was it like? Did you continue homeschooling all through school?
Yeah.
And what was that like on trying to apply these biblical truths to life whenever not everyone is going to do that?
Yeah. No, yeah. So I would end up staying homeschool until I graduated high school, but I got to be a part of a program, which was so good for me. I don't think I could have been a person who was just like in the house. And so we were part of a place called Western Christian, which was an actual high school. But we would go just Fridays when I started, which was like in sixth grade. But by the time I was like in middle school and high school, we went like twice a week. So it was like a perfect balance. And junior high was a huge growing season with me in the Lord. Like I said, I don't really, if I'm going to do anything, I'm always just going to do it to the most extreme point. And that was it for me with even the Lord. Like, I just always was aware, I think, and I also did grow up with older siblings and even parents who, they were young for the age they had my older siblings, but they were older for our age. And so just even growing up with them, just knowing I needed to take my faith seriously, but grew up with a pastor and his wife who just, we're just really incredible. And like, I grew a ton in junior high, just in scripture with the Lord. I served a ton. And I just loved it. And so that helped with just even middle school, but it was still kind of somewhat of a bubble. It wasn't until really like high school where, you're noticing other things. And I was also friends with people outside of my school, but still out in middle school, your friends, your community is the same people who went to church, and the same people who went to church were a part of our homeschool group. So everything was still such a bubble. But I honestly am really grateful, because I think because of the foundation I got to build while being safe really helped me not walk in a ton of sin that a lot of people struggled with in high school. And like peer pressure was never anything I'd ever struggled with. Like I could be around something and it never have any effect on me. But I also I think even sometimes in my controlling personality, seeing people be out of control or like let something control them that seemed so weak to me. So even in that, I think having that time in elementary and middle school, be bubbled, but learn in the Lord really helped as I walked through high school. And high school was when as I stepped into it, got involved in leadership program, and that would really start, I feel like, in my personality and just like a lot of people calling things out in me. Because like before then I was just like, a girl who just like really joyful life. I was really unaware, I think, of even what could be going on in the world, or people had like bad life. I don't know. I just like joy had always been something that the Lord has always like graced me with. And so I think I was always just like, like whatever, I want to like serve and like help people. And so like I said, I know for some people it's like, I hate the Christian bubble. But like I said, for me, at least in the middle school aspect of it, it was so incredible because I realized it helped me such a time build something that it will later take me into high school to be just in all, even now, that I think helped me in a foundation that when I was allowed to have friends that didn't go to church or that would go public school kids, and that were walking in full sin, I think it helped with even my trust that my parents had for me, because it was just like I learned to, I had a foundation for it. So
yeah, man, that's awesome. So in that, we're getting towards your high school years. Was there ever a like struggle for obedience? Like once you kind of get towards out the bubble, I know you mentioned that you didn't really struggle with peer pressure, but all the things that isn't peers that are pressuring you into, but just the attacks of the enemy. It says that we are against the prince of the power of the air. So like it's anything like that. Was there ever a struggle for obedience? Because you got saved at such a young age that now it's sanctification. Salvation is set.
Literally.
But sanctification from the point of 10 and on, that blows my mind.
Yeah. No, and my biggest thing, and I think I still even struggle with it at times, is it's people pleasing. I think at that time, so I grew up in a family that like, in all the senses, had it really together. Like, parents who beautiful marriage who both would serve in their own things and then would serve together. Siblings who were in ministry, we were very much like the you have it together family, and like we're known at your church, and just like because like it was all perfect. And I think when I stepped into high school, like I said, I was a part of a program called ASB, which is our leadership team for our whole school. That place really shaped me because I stayed in it all 4 years. And at this point, you're kind of just more aware of things, and all my siblings had really walked with the Lord too for all my whole life. It just didn't feel like it would separate any of it. But as we started getting older, Lowell, who me and him, he's the brother I was adopted with, we started just really becoming opposite. Like in me being such a people pleasing and like the thought to disappoint people, and like and at this age, I think was a lot of the things you don't realize in being adopted. No matter how beautiful of a home you end up in, there are things that from 0 to 6 I walked in that I'll never know, but you're gonna walk in the mentality that those things bring, which sometimes I think can be worse because it's like you feel like you react in certain ways and you have no idea why. And like it's such a thing I never really have, and like trust for men has always been a struggle, but it's never been from fear, but like you just don't have a lot to like help explain. And so at this point, Lul really started going off hill, and I think for me to never be an issue or a problem, and it wasn't like, this sounds so dramatic of like, oh, your parents are going to send you back. That's not the case, but even you already kind of somewhat feel like a burden because you're just like, it's a lot of kids. That's just so much. So like to not be, I was like, I will be the most perfect human being ever, which no one really ever is. And it was really, for me, a lot of the time, it was such a huge mental battle of like never bringing up a problem, or if I like was hurt or something happened at school or at church, like I was, it could be literally the most minor thing but for me, it felt just like another thing on my parents' plate. And so that's what I think in high school really started this thing of like, I will be perfect. Don't worry. And it's like, it's never been done, but it's like, Mena's going to do it, especially. And I think for Lou and his mindset, it was because of how much he was struggling mentally. In me with struggling mentally, I was like, I'll just be perfect and ignore it. It was like, I'm just going to like blow it all up, And so in what would start for my parents, a battle that we've honestly had to fight still. And he just really struggled. And like I said, I think it's hard because you don't know how to process and what to say. But I also know even for my parents and I think adopted parents, you don't even know how to help because you're like, we're here, we've provided for you, we've loved you, but it's so internal and it's so not them, that I think they even struggled with dealing with it. And something I always say too is like, weirdly, you cannot treat your adoptive kids as the same exact way you would treat your biological, because there's already a trust your biological have naturally from being born. But I think sometimes it's like, no, we should treat them exactly the same. But it's like sometimes it'll be worse. And so that relationship was really a struggle for them for all of high school. And so me and him really distanced in that, just because I was just like, so like, no. And then I think it was just like, you're such a kiss up. And weirdly, I was like everything he wasn't. And then but like, I also never wanted to be anything like him. And so high school in that sense was like really hard. And I think too, like I was really innocent. And so you're like seeing things happen, but you don't quite know what's all of it's happening. And then, like I said, when I was 14, something happened in my family with my brother, and noticing it, but like you still don't know. And like I said, I'm just in my bubble of like, it's my friends, it's my family, like everything's perfect. But I think at that point, it's slowly starting to unravel of like, there are things our family does need to deal with, but it's each of us as individuals. And so, yeah. And so just like watching it all, but like still had a really incredible relationship with my parents and with my siblings as an individual. But realizing the mesh together as a whole family was like kind of tearing. But I think too, something about my family is there's a lot of people pleasing in all of us. So it's just like, let's kind of not talk about it, and let's just kind of like serve and love the Lord, you know? But for sure, like I think when my sisters, by the time I was in high school, they were way out of high school. And so they lived their life and it was unknown. But I think when my oldest brother walked through all that he walked through, that's when it all started being like, oh, this is all kind of like slowly falling apart, what's going on. And for me on the high school side, like I said, I really loved it. Definitely was just in the popular crew, but I was also a girl, and I love this about my mom, but my sister struggled in friendships when they were younger. And so something about me that she really drilled in my head is to always notice the outsider. So if we would, we're going to church camp and we get to church and like, we're all getting on the bus and I'm hanging with my friends, my mom would always come up to me and be like, hey, that girl, and now I literally always will notice that person. And so for me, it was, though I was like a popular kid, I guess you could say, and like had all the friends, no one ever like hated me because you were always invited. If like I was concerned, you were always going to be welcome. You were always going to be a part. It didn't really matter who you were. And not like I hung out with like everybody, but like I did always want to make sure I took time with people, but that also did feed into the people pleasing. And like, I know I struggle with it now. Like people are like, oh, like we're gonna do this thing, and I'm like, is this person invited? And it's like, it's fine, but I'm like, no, but it's not, because like I won't be able to sit with myself if there are. And it really started then. But like I said, I think at times I can get bothered by it because I'm like, no, they're fine. But for me, I'm like, hi, how are you? Like, I've always had that part to make people feel seen. But yeah, like just for me in the high school side and school side, loved it. There was nothing, like I said, school was school. You did it. And sin for me at that point, like said, I struggled with people pleasing. Pride was like a huge thing for me, but it was like hidden in like self-humility, but like you really didn't have it. Definitely like a holier than thou kind of mentality, but I would never tell you because it, like I said, it was so confusing because I was so like wanted to serve and help everybody. But like in that, you obviously got attention for that. And so like love what that fed into, but then shame would come in quickly because it's like, you shouldn't love that. So it was just like this crazy cycle. But yeah, like at that point, just words are being spoken over you of like, you just have incredible way of articulating stuff. Like you're really going to go far. And I've never had like, I'm gonna be this kind of like, there was just nothing I'd ever been like, this. I just knew I wanted to do something that mattered, but also something that gave me some purpose. So I think all of high school, it was like trying to figure out what that was. And I was like in ASB, your freshman year, you just come in and it's kind of hard to get into it. So you're already like the group. But after, so my sophomore, junior, senior year, I was the chaplain of the school. And stayed in that position. And so I think even in that, got to have roles, noticing I could potentially be in ministry, But if I'm being really honest, I think being in ministry or like working at a church just seemed like a lazy cop out for like not wanting to actually work. Cause I think I kind of saw it in certain people of like my sister's friends or like, and like I said, I was a really aware child. So like even like family friends who are married and who their husbands, I'm like, go get a job because your job at church is not like providing. I just saw it as weak. But people are like, yeah, you're going to do all these things. I was like, okay. And I never really quite knew any spiritual gift I had besides one, which was the gift of helps that my parents had told me like really early on. I just was like, great. I love serving people. Helps.
I don't know.
To just serve.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard it as that. I've heard it as
really?
servanthood, but not helps.
But to me, I was like, whatever. Okay. But I knew that part of me. So yeah, just high school though I loved it. Just got to grow. But then when I was, I'd say probably 15 that was like the sin. So for my sin struggle, and it's weird to say like I have one, I know I have a lot, but like my major one I would say was in pornography. And that it was so weird because for me, and still to this day, like I've only had one boyfriend, and even that like never kissed, barely held hands. All that stuff was like just no for me. But like I said, it was a past fear that I never knew what it was there for. And so I felt like to have friends who were involved in it and just were like, oh, you're like figuring it out. And in homeschool circle too, like I didn't grow up in your typical homeschool circle. I think people have an idea of what homeschoolers are. Ours was a little more progressive, and like the kids were not, there's some weirdos, but not all of them, you know? And I know too, like my year, our freshman year class was the biggest one, but it finally was a group of kids who like weren't odd, weren't weird. And in those 4 years, we like really grew it. And so for me, like homeschooling, it was just not a weird circle, but had friends who we would talk about it of like, yeah, I struggle with this, but you would never really say the word of like pornography and masturbation. And I also had friends fully in the sin of like sleeping with someone. And so I think church, I'm not that bad. Like, it's just not that bad. So that was a hidden thing I walked through in high school that no one really knew about. But, you know, still served, still loved the Lord, still had incredible parents. And the older I got into high school, I think that's when I was just more aware that like the world isn't perfect and like life isn't perfect and people aren't perfect. And like had a few friends who like I said, I would always like, oh, like whatever kind of girl. And like, I realized like, oh, certain friends, I'm like, you're kind of verbally abusive, but I had never noticed it, you know? And like I said, guys were never a struggle. I always had guy friends. So for me, they were nothing special, which was, I think, great for my parents to like, they weren't like, you can't be together or anything. And so I didn't date. My first boyfriend was when I was 17. And he was a guy I knew from church. We grew up together. And I was really unaware of boys for a long time, just because I think for me, they were just friends, and relationships scared the absolute crap out of me. And for high school, even I knew, I was like, this is such a baby. But even my parents were just like, you should probably never like really date in high school. And it was nothing we ever talked about. So, but like my brother had a girlfriend in high school. My sisters never did. So like you kind of never knew like the line. And like, you know, guys would say things to you or would flirt, but you're just like not aware. And so I think for me, having like this hidden pornography issue, and then when I started talking to this guy, he was very, 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 very broken. And so I was like, great, I can fix someone. But for the first time, like my joy didn't outweigh it. And like my love of the Lord didn't outweigh it. It honestly did so much more to me. And in a matter of one, me and him talked for like a really long time before I'd even be his girlfriend. Just because my parents, I remember, were just being like, what are you guys doing? Because like you're friends, but you're not friends. And I was like, I don't know. Like we are though. Like we are friends. And so then when he asked me to be his girlfriend, I was like, sure, you know, why not? I was 17 and going into my senior year. And like I said, you have this hidden sin. I'm watching everything happening with my family. Cause like at this point, my brother was like just an absolute train wreck. And my oldest brother is just kind of out of the house, really distant. And so it's just me and my little brother and my sisters, and we're all close. So I think in a sense, he was somewhat of a distraction to just be like another thing to keep me busy. I was just a really busy person. And And so when he was like, "You want to be my girlfriend?" I was like, "Sure, why not?" You know, he had asked my dad. He did all the right things, served at church, all the amazing things. And then right when we got together, like all the 5 months of us talking, and he was so perfect, and his family loved me, just all these things. Within it just flopped. And he had suicide was a huge thing, and had like almost tried to commit right before we had really met. And he just really clung on to me. And I just was like, oh my gosh, one, I'm being suffocated, but also the concept of like, oh my gosh, no, you cannot simply live just like for me. And like I said, because of the bubble I think I was in, it just seems so dramatic. Suicide seems so huge. Anxiety seems so huge. And I've never struggled with that. And I just did not understand how someone could just like in a switch not be okay. And I know us two dating was probably not the best because I'm just such a get over it person, like then be happy. And so just that concept didn't make sense to me. And he was just really, really just verbally said things and just like really manipulated spiritually too, of just like, but I need you. And then when it came, because we only officially ever dated for like 2 months, it finally came, and I remember I came crying to my mom because he had called me, because I was like, I think we should like break up. And he was like, oh my gosh, no. And just, I'm going to kill myself if you do, da, da, da. So I just went to my mom, and she was just like, you cannot be in this. Like and I ended up calling my cousin, who was our youth pastor at that time, but, didn't realize when you tell a youth pastor, they are obligated by law to tell parents. And so it ended up being this massive thing. And that was hard because for the month that we dealt with that, literally was like, he's going to end it. And he would text me like, it's it tonight. You won't. And as being a girl, one who's like such a people pleaser and just did not like my deepest thing. I'm like, I'd rather you be angry at me and all these things. But if you said like, I'm disappointed in you, like that just like broke me. So like to literally, a part of me was like, I'm actually killing this guy. I would just be like, I'll just date him. Like, we'll just date. And, my parents are like, absolutely not. Like, no, you're not. And I'm like, but like, yes, we can. And even like in our relationship, it was very innocent. Like I said, something I told him right off the bat was, I was like, I will not kiss you until when we've said I love you. And that does not mean when you've said it, like when I've said it. And already we took 5 months for me to even allow him to be my boyfriend. So I think a part of me knew like, this isn't going that far. It was so innocent. And he, like I said, he was a public school kid, and just like his family home was really broken, but like they really loved me for him. And something he had told me once that like, it even took me a while to tell anyone, was when I came into the picture, because of like us growing up in the church, his mom knew who I was and just was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, like if she's going to go out with you, like that's amazing. Cause all the other girls he had dated had been girls who'd been suicidal or really broken. And so I think for her, it was like, literally you're perfect, and she was the one who told him like, don't tell her anything that you struggle with and what you walk through. And so that's why I didn't know in those 5 months that he ever walked through any of that until we dated, because it was like, if she knows, she's probably going to run, which I think I so would have, because I was so innocent. I was so unaware of the world that was just like, oh my gosh. So when it all happened, I literally was like, what is going on? And so, yeah, like, but that was for sure, I think, a time that like joy went away for a little bit. And I was like, wait, Lord, like I really, really, really need to know what this like faith thing is. Cause I had it, cause I was around it, but like how much of it was like mine. And yeah, I think about that high school season of like, cause freshman, sophomore and beginning of junior, it was it was sweet. Nothing crazy. Had the friends, nothing happened. And then as I was going into my junior year and into my senior year, I think was like, we got to grow up and we have to be aware of things. And so, I think even when I broke up with him, it was really hard for sure. And I only had like 3 months left of high school at that point. And I just kind of like went through it. We finished high school. Yeah, you did the prom, you did all the things. It was fun. It was nothing crazy, but high school was for sure a season of like it didn't fully open into senior year because I would end up dealing with a lot after, but it was kind of like, oh, this world isn't perfect and it's not put together, you know?
So you said that you dealt with stuff after, but I do want to hear, maybe it'll be after, that's whenever it really happens, but how the Lord worked through you in that point of the people pleasing or the porn issue or whatever other sin issue, pride you mentioned.
Yeah.
What was the Lord doing in those moments that like now you can look back on and be like, oh man, he was, maybe it was just conviction. That's what the Lord was doing, was just conviction to lead you to repentance, to then, help you in your walk. What was the Lord doing?
Yeah. I would. So obviously when you're, especially in sin, I think like pornography, it's so hidden, so much shame, and it just like piles on. But when I had stopped was I went to a high school camp and a lady just straight up called it out. And I had never met anyone who could do that. Walked up to me and was just like, I think you're in this because God said so. And I literally was like, I don't even know you.
I'm hurt.
No, literally, I'm like, God, stop eavesdropping. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, stop talking about me to other people. But she was so kind and she was so gentle, and never saw her again. But I, from that point, I never did it again.
Wow.
And it, obviously the freedom aspect would come years later. And I lived in that would come in when I talk about Africa and stuff like that. Wait, you can actually stop from sin, but the shame and the guilt of oh my gosh, I'm going to do it again. And I was so scared of my phone. And I think for me, I didn't talk to anyone in my circle. So I think that even felt like a shame, even though I stopped. But it kind of became the programs you have, day 1, day 2. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't freed from that sin. But that's, when I went to that high school camp, my last winter high school camp, she just said it. And I was like, yep, yeah. And she was like, and she just was, even though she was kind, she was like, it will break you and it would destroy a lot. And I think even still now, for girls to walk through that is never talked about. Then it definitely wasn't. And I think too, my story was unique in the sense of I was pure in literally every other ounce of the word, but just that one thing. So for me, it felt why do I even struggle with this? Because I've not been with a guy and I never really had lustful thoughts and stuff like that. But I think for me, because physical men scared me, to hide it, it felt like I could figure it out and I could be in control. And so it just in being able, as I've grown with the Lord, I'm like, oh, that's probably why you did it, is just because the real was so much worse than this sin. And then especially, I said, I think in having a boyfriend, hearing what your friends are doing with boyfriends. And then my boyfriend was someone who had done all those things. And so I remember one of our very first fights was because I wouldn't fully hold his hand. I would literally just hold the pinky. And he was like, what is going on? And I was like, I don't know. I literally don't know. I have no idea. And so it was just so much I couldn't explain. But I do remember after talking to her, I was like, that was the one thing the Lord took away. And I think some of us have those sins that's just okay, no, I'm good. And I never watched anything. The people pleasing part, like I said, I think today, literally, I think that's something I have to just be oh, hold on, my worth isn't in this. And also my worth isn't in pleasing everyone. And people do love me, even if I can't do something for them. And people probably don't even expect you to do something for them. But yeah, I think that one sin was one that just pornography was just quickly okay, you're good. And I think it was so redeeming too, because it was when that camp had happened, I had broken up with my boyfriend a week later. And so even in him wanting it back, just feeling from the Lord, I was it felt like such an old life. And I was I actually can't go back to that person anymore. But that shame still hurt. Who do I talk to? And when do I say something? Or it's okay. God breezes past it. And I think too, in finishing out high school, I finished out high school, but I had no idea what I was going to do. And that's where I think the pride came in as well. And the people pleasing mixed together. Cause it was it was so embarrassing to be I don't know. I have no idea. But I knew college, it was just so clear to me that's not where I was supposed to be, but I wanted it to be because it gave people an answer. And people are still telling you like, oh, like God is just going to do these crazy things. And I think too, I got to lead so much and I got to be a part, and people just like kind of brought things to me. So it was just like, whatever, I'll take it. So finally, I think graduating high school was like, I made the decision, and I was just like kind of waiting to be like, God, just bring it. Like someone asked me to like join this or be a part of this, and
make it clear.
No, literally. And the awesome part about my parents were my dad went for a year. My dad and my mom does have a degree, but college was just like never pushed on us. I think for like a lot of kids are. And so they were like, take a gap year, figure it out. And the summer after high school, I just like stayed busy. And weirdly after that point, I jumped from like guy to guy to guy, but it was so I could just be friends with the guys. I think it was just one, being in between three boys. I knew how to banter. I knew how to have fun. I hated drama, but like not the fake like girl who's like, oh my gosh, I hate drama, but like really loves it. So like guys wanted to be my friends. And so that summer I was just like, oh, like I could just be friends with these dudes, but like we really weren't friends. And also I was just trying to really distract from myself from home. Cause then at this point, graduating high school, everything's happening with my brothers. And at this point, my parents would get calls at like 3 a.m. from the cops, because like they'd pick up Lou from just the park, and he wasn't living with us, and he would just be really verbally abusive to my mom and just say really horrible things. And so there was just like a lot of distance we were trying to create, but also he's your kid. And like for me, like my brother. But I just wanted to be so removed from it. And in that gap year, it just really, I think, came because we were like more adults, and now all these issues that you have, they're just not cute anymore. You can't just be like a victim for that long if you're not going to process. And like I said, I still knew I had so much I needed to walk through. Lou was verbalizing all of it and just like, causing hell, I think, just everywhere he went. Where for me, I just kept it so internal. And so, yeah, in that year, I just worked at Chick-fil-A. Let's go. And just served, and was so lost though. Like, loved the Lord, loved church, but like deep down was like, I have no clue who like I actually am. And so then when that gap year was ending, it was February of 2019, and I literally was on Instagram, and I saw a 2-month missions trip. You'd go to 4 different countries. And I applied, called, put my deposit in, all within maybe like 2 hours. Got accepted. No, literally. Called my parents and I said, I'm going to Africa for the summer.
Wow.
My mom, let's just say, was pissed. And I think it was just like, you're obviously not talking about things you're going through. But I just like had no idea how to even like start. And like I said, I think finally was like walking through my ex-boyfriend. I moved past that. All that stuff happened, and moved on. And just was like not dealing with it. But like that fear, and I struggled with that probably for another 3 years of like, I was waiting to get a call that he had died or something like that. And then throughout my gap year too, these guys that like I would just use as like, oh, like they're just friends, but like we're just kind of distracting each other and just hanging out all the time, would end up dating after the same girl. It happened 3 times. 3 guys with the same girl who was one of my best friends. And like I said, I was the girl like, oh, I don't care. And I just, like I said, I think over time, I just was like, I was over it. I was over home. I was over California. I was over all of it. And I was like, mission trip, genius idea. I can disappear. I can serve the Lord. No, literally. I'm literally in another country. But then as we prepared for me to actually go, it was the first time I was ever going back to Africa. Why are you going? With an organization I had no idea about. And mind you, I've never at this point even been to my parents like, I want to go to Africa. Or like, I want to like, it was just on the spur of the moment. I think for my parents, it was like, this child's having this issue. This child's having this issue. And then now this one who we thought was fine is like, I'm peacing out. And I signed up in February. We left in May. Like, you know what I'm saying?
That's
just
crazy.
Like, and it just, yeah. And thankfully my parents were like, okay, let's do it. But even when I went, I I was in New York City, and I texted my mom and I said, I'm going to be off my phone the whole time. I think we called maybe twice, maybe once. And I think they were just like, what is going on? And like, for me, I really didn't even know. But I think it was finally the first time in my life I was like, I was willing to not be okay. And I was like, no, I've got issues. And I've got to walk through things. And like I said, pornography, I had stopped doing it. But that, like, it felt like it was so close, and had lost so much identity. I feel like even in friendships now, because of all of that, my family, just all of that. And so I was like, I'll just serve the Lord. And what I would not know, though, this trip was way more for me than it ever could be of what I did or all of that. But it'd be literally 2 months that would absolutely radically change my life. And right off the bat, they were like, you have the gift of evangelism. And I was like, heck no. I do not. I was like, I know scripture, and I think that's why I can tell the gospel well, and it was just very clear. And from there, people were just like, you're called to do this. Like, and I was like, I just really am not, because the people called to do this are just have it together. But yeah, I'd spend 2 months in Africa, jump around, and I obviously, weirdly, deja vu always happens, because it's pictures you've seen in your past start to weirdly, like, I feel like I've seen this alleyway. I was really able to connect with the people of Africa. There's like just little things like that. But it changed my life. And like our first country we went to with my team, we went to Uganda. And that trip was horrible. Okay. In the eyes of like a mission trip, but our team really needed it, because we only did, I think, 1 day of ministry of our 2 weeks there. Our ministry partners were crazy. We think like one of them was like a psycho, because he had like 7 different IDs and like carried a gun on. And we were like, this is a little sketch. But it was so needed, because we were with our team 24/7, and the people on that team are actually some of the people I get to now work with and are some of my best friends. But one of the guys named Austin, who is now still like one of my best friends, he had just come and just was like, I think I was there like 3 days, and he's like, I had a dream about you last night. I was like, kind of odd, a little weird. But it was just like the Lord telling him, like, one, it was like me getting baptized in the Holy Spirit, but like also just like little things of like, this isn't just a missions trip for her. And we had an incredible girl leader named Carly, who's also now my coworker. And they just like really discipled me, really walked with the Lord. And I was never a shy girl, which we all know, but I was never bold. Like, I could talk, but I was never just gonna like, oh, here you go. And then when I went to Kenya, was a guy I would meet who was one of our leaders, who he had the gift of evangelism, and he just really poured into me through scripture, though, and how to do it. And that was the first time we had gone to the hospital, and I had heard the audible voice of the Lord, and it was so crazy. But we're walking the hospital, and God was like, you're not supposed to be in the hospital. It's the rest of the team. You're supposed to be outside. And I was like, it was so weird, though, because you're like, I have to obey, because it literally felt like I could look and he was going to stand right there.
Wow, that's really cool.
And I went out, and this Muslim girl was like so highlighted to me. So I sat down, and I prayed real quickly, and I was like Jesus just like speaks through me. And we would then end up having this like hour and a half conversation, and heard her story, and something about like, I think the way I evangelize, I really want to be relational. So I want to hear your story and hear, because you just don't realize how much the Lord has been in someone's life. I think when you can be an outside of like, oh, God was there in that and in that. And so she really got to hear her story, and she got saved, but it was so holy. And I remember being like, wait, I think that's like what everyone's talking about. And so it was really radical. And like I said, that trip was really awesome. Like when I was in Uganda, saw for the first time ever someone walk, and because I had prayed for her, and I just was like, and you're a kid like in a candy shop, because you're just like, oh my God, like, wait, everyone's saying this, and you're like, yeah, no, I know God can heal. But then you're talking to a lady who hasn't walked for 40 years and gets up. It literally is the coolest thing. And it's things that even though I've now gotten to see so many radical things, I hope I never like am tired of them, or like, oh yeah, I've seen someone,
it becomes normal.
Yeah, like I just never want that to happen. But yeah, that trip was just really radical. I was in a community that like loved me well. Finally started processing everything. of my adoption, of growing up, people pleasing. And that's when I say, like, I think in finding freedom and a prayer request, there was one day I was like sitting with the Lord, and he was like, ask me to like forget all the images you've ever seen, like in your pornography addiction. And I never even thought that like that could be a thing. And I feel like the healing he's done, like, because I for a long time felt like I wasn't pure. Like I could tell people I was a virgin, but I was like, I couldn't say I was pure. And just like, yeah, all that the Lord did in that to like really heal and like literally like really take away all that. And like even while I was there, got to call that friend who I was deeply hurt by and was like, I forgive you. And like there was such joy and repentance became like such a beautiful thing. And I think being on that trip, I was like, because I was supposed to figure out what I was supposed to do after that. But I was like, I don't know if I could do anything else but this. Like, and that just for me just meant serving Jesus. Like, I was like, any job or working at a desk or I don't know, like there was nothing I felt like to me matched just like serving and loving on the Lord. And in that people got to learn about Jesus. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but like, we're going to figure out how to do that.
So did your mindset flip of like earlier you said people that work in ministry are using the excuse to not have to do hard work? Did it flip in that? Because it sounds like...
Yes. Just a little. No, for sure. I think it was because I was like... sometimes I hate the title that like, oh, it's a job. Because for me, it's like, it should be just really a life. Mm-hmm. And it like... And I think that's been a huge season. And for me that I have gotten to have the job title of being in ministry. But like something when I came home like this past year, the Lord was like serving your church, because there are people who have full-time jobs and serve at church. There was nothing for me that it'd been a while that I got to serve Jesus without it being a paycheck or a work job. And so that's been a really beautiful thing. And like I said, I'll get to that too, but ministry kind of became a job for me for a while. I was like, oh, it's just the thing I did. And so now it's been a really beautiful season where there is a job side to it, but there's also another side. But I remember, yeah, like that being that 19-year-old girl. And at that point I was in Rwanda and just being like, I don't care where it takes me. And I don't even care if it took me home, but I was like, I want to do this and I need to figure out it. Like, it was literally like, I need to do this because Lord, I don't think I could ever do any other job and feel okay, because I'm feeling like I'm gypping you. And like I said, I think he started working even in that people pleasing, because I know for a while it was like, oh, am I doing this because I think I owe God something? But then it was like, but I do. Like, I actually owe him my whole life. Mm-hmm. And I don't want that to be just something I say, but it actually be proven that like, Lord, if you ask of me, you will get it. And so like, yeah, weirdly, I think we're all called to be missionaries. I think it's not going to be the mission field. I think it could be your job. And I think for me, like I said, a lay down life for the Lord didn't mean something I was going to do on a Sunday, or I was going to do like after work hours. But like, I was like, I need to figure out, like, because I'm going to do it for all of it. And so left that trip. The Lord even walked me through a lot of like needing to forgive my parents. Forgiveness was like such a weird concept. Forgiving myself. Learned a lot of identity in daughtership, and like that's actually the root. And if you know me, you've probably heard me say that often, of just being a daughter is just a huge thing for me, just because I think I learned of like, I think I was a servant in the house of the Lord, but I wasn't a kid, and a kid is owed so much more, and it talks about that in Matthew. But just like a kid has a name and an inheritance, and you're just able to walk in, you know, and where a servant has rules, there's a separation.
It says in John 15, the parable of the true vine, of like, doesn't call us to be slaves anymore, but literally to be his friends. And
I realized, as being such a people pleasing kid, I was like even doing that with the Lord. And so I was like, wait, like I get to be a child. And I think that's one of the things I share. Probably anytime I ever teach or something, I'm going to relate it to being a kid. Because I think sometimes we grow up and we're just like, okay, how can I just serve God? And I'm like, but from what heart posture are you serving at him? From being his kid, and he's going to love you no matter what. And so, yeah, that radically changed the people pleasing mentality I had of like, it's like a dad with an office, but you're always welcome. Like no matter what business he's doing or, you know, whatever, like you're always welcome. And so, yeah, even like leaving Africa, I was like, okay, how are we going to figure out how to do this? And so I remember even coming home, just feeling really remorseful to even my parents. Like, I'm so sorry. Just like, because they hadn't asked for everything that they had walked through. And I think for me, I had just placed the blame. And it was really like, I never blamed anybody, but I know I'm like, for sure acted a certain way. But I remember I came home and I was like, I just want y'all to know my entire life has been changed. And for me, I definitely thought it meant like literally going back to Africa in the middle of nowhere and serving the Lord. And I was willing to do that. But I was 19 and they were like, so yeah, no. And I was like, but like, yes, guys, come on. Everybody get on board with this because this is amazing.
There's so much to be happy about.
No,
right
literally.
now.
I'm like, guys, this is incredible. But I think I just was, it just changed so much of who I was that summer. And so I came home just like so alive, just healed through so much. And then met a girl who I'd grown up with. She had been in mission, like a missionary kid. She was the one person who understood what I was walking through. She was like, no, I get it. Because I came home and I was like, y'all are so ungrateful. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I think every mission trip you go on, you're just like, you guys don't understand, like, what all these, all this
Your
crap.
eyes have been opened.
No, literally. But it was really awesome to grow a friendship with her. And so she became a really close friend. And I was just trying to figure out how I was going to be a part. And so I went with another organization. But the director of that organization is my current boss now. And when he left that summer, 2019, he was starting an organization. And he was like, hey, we want you to be a part of it. And I was at the same time being asked with the organization I just went on to lead that same exact trip with one of the guys on that team. And I just knew I was supposed to be with my now boss. And like I said, it was starting from the ground up. I was in California. All of this was happening South Carolina. And I never left California either. So I was like, oh yeah, let's go. And so we were preparing to go the next summer, which would be COVID year. And so I said yes immediately. Like because while I was in Africa, pretty like Brent, who's like not my boss, and Austin were just like when you get home, there's a call we have for you. And so they just really believed in me right off the bat. And so I was like so excited for this call. So when the other place was like, hey, we want you, I was like, no, I'm just like waiting, And so I told my parents, I was like, okay, I'm going back. And this time I was going to go the whole summer, all 3 months. And I was going to be a leader, which it's so funny because I'm like, I had no business, but the Lord knew. And so then COVID would hit, obviously. And so I remember being devastated because at this point, like all I'm doing literally is working at Chick-fil-A. And my plan is just to go on these mission trips and eventually, hopefully, maybe someday move there. And so, yeah, at the end of 2019, just ended it on a high of just really in love with the Lord, really serving with my young adults at my church. And that's starting to be a place that I'm really starting to have a heart for young adults. So then, yeah, we step into 2020. We're getting ready. We're about to go. And obviously March hits, COVID. You can't go. And we're like, and I was so disappointed. I think
Yeah.
Just, I was so disappointed. And I was like, dang it. And it was okay because we were going to just push back to winter. But now it just felt like, what am I going to do? I was literally going to be gone from May to August. So I was like, what the heck am I supposed to do here? So yeah, just was like, this is boring. But would then meet another guy who was a family friend, and got really involved with their family. His sister ended up just getting pregnant, and really confided in me, and she was in high school. And so all of this is happening, and I'm just like, okay. And he's an incredible dude. Parents love him, all this stuff. At this point, in these past few years, both my sisters had gotten married. One of my sisters had a baby and moved to Idaho because of her husband being from there. And she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and just something she couldn't do in California. And so I remember it was May, and so me and this guy, I finally came to him and was like, listen, we've got to figure out what this thing is because I can't keep doing it this long and da-da-da-da-da. He had a lot of things. He was like, I just need to patch up a few things. But like also felt really, really, really unworthy of me. And he kept saying that. I never understood it. And so I was like, let's take a month break. And in that month break, my parents came to me and were like, we're moving to Idaho. And I literally was like, I'm sorry, what?
Have fun.
No, I'm like, okay, so y'all are going? And like, obviously, I had never left California since I'd been adopted. Same church, same pretty much friend group that I had met like in elementary school through high school. And I think too, finally was like, it was such a good season of my life. Like life was really good. And I was like, we're what? And also we're moving in a month. And so, yeah, in June, we packed up our life. And at that point, it's just me and my youngest brother who came because both my sisters are married. My oldest brother's out of the house and was just, living his life. He hadn't been living with us probably for 2 years now. And like in the shortest of where I was pissed. I mean, I don't usually get angry, you know that about me, but like I was not happy. And so, yeah, we left. And I also left with everything with this guy unsaid. And I didn't. So I texted him on my drive there that I was moving. He was.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it was a lot. And I think I just was like, what is going on? Like, it felt like such whiplash. And I also went there with a friend that I'd walked through a lot with these guys. And my parents didn't know. And my mom, like, surprised me. Like, she's coming. And I literally was like, worst person that could probably come. But whatever. And so, yeah, moved to Idaho. And I would spend the next year and a half probably because that first year of that end of 2020, because I went there in June to the end, I hated it, and my parents fully knew. It really, really caused a wrench in my parents' relationship, my relationship with the Lord for a little bit, and my youngest brother. If I was mad, I mean, he was worse. And so, and it just being the four of us in an area that like we went from being people who were so involved in so many different things of like we're in a home and stuck together, and we all kind of just hate each other a little bit, and there's not much in Idaho. I don't know if you've ever been. So it's like, where are we going to go? And then it snows. So, and I hated it. I like really hated it. And I would visit California here and there and like dealt with the thing with the guy, all of that, but just was like, what is going on, Lord? And I had been asked to come lead that trip in winter of 2020 that got pushed back. And the Lord was like, you can't go. He's like, you are not in a mental state to walk anyone through anything and tell them anything because you've just spent when you've not like really been in your word for the past few months. And then it was, I remember it specifically, but it was fall of that year because as the Lord was telling me like, you can't lead, because I almost just went. The Lord was like, you really could use this time of like being someone who has been in community and who's been in all these things that like your faith people helped you with. You could actually see how much of it's worth it if you feel like you're called to the mission field. And that's when I think a really big flip for me happened. And like I said, I never really showed it because I was so angry, I think, with my parents. I didn't want them to notice that like this could actually be for me as much as it was for them. But yeah, I decided, I was like, wait, yeah, if I think I can go on the mission field and I can't even be alone here in Idaho, like what am I supposed to do? And it was so timing. Like I only made 2 friends there. Like I said, I was a girl who I'm like, I don't struggle with friends. So the fact that I cannot meet friends is like, it was so the Lord being like, I'm trying to keep you just to me in this season. So would you learn? And so, yeah, I decided not to go in that 2020 trip, but decided to go that next summer. And just spent, that year just pretty much sitting with the Lord and being with the Lord and walking through a lot. I had started like kind of a hidden relationship with this guy that like was really broken and really reminded me of my ex, but like kind of a little better. But something that had happened in 2020, obviously growing up in California, all the stuff, I had decided to make one Instagram post of my thoughts on abortion, because people are like, what are your thoughts? Da, 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 da. You're black but like, are adopted by white people. Like, and I literally, when I tell you, was like, okay, whatever. Did not think much of it. Posted, and this thing blew up. And I mean, people are sending death threats and da, 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 like all this stuff that I was like, you'll need to relax. What is going on?
Chill.
But I think that was when the Lord was teaching me what boldness looked like, not just like talking a lot. And I decided, I was like, and I got really involved in politics. And that led me even into moving to Idaho. I just started just sharing my opinions and my thoughts, and people loved it and like ate it up. But then also there you had half, like there was this guy who I'd gone to high school with, started paying people to like send horrible text messages to me. It just got way more dramatic than it needed to be. And I was like, guys, I'm literally 19 and I'm just posting my thoughts, 20 at this point. But yeah, so I was like weirdly doing that, and that consumed me. And so I started getting really bold for that, and like my beliefs and my thoughts and all these things. And the Lord was just trying, like, I think the Lord was like, okay, yes, but you're really using it for the wrong thing. Like, what are you doing? And so, like I said, Idaho weirdly, I think, was good for me. And so then when that next summer came, so now we're in summer 2021, I got discipled in the middle of nowhere, Zimbabwe, for 3 months. And the way my trip was set up is like you're leading team members half the time, but half the time you're getting intensely discipled, was because my boss was like, I feel like you guys are people who are going to be with us the long term, so get discipled so you can be with us. But yeah, got to live under a man named Bruce in the middle of Zimbabwe. If you ever meet him, he used to be in the special forces, and now I think he just does that for the Lord. And lived the hardest 3 months of my life. You camped out, lived with 5 people. Like I said, these people are some of my best friends now. But you wanted hot water, you made a fire. You cooked all your meals. You sat in like 5-hour teachings and just studied scripture. You'd get like a 30-minute maybe walk, process, get back in it for the next like 4. And that's all we did when we'd be with him for like 2 weeks at a time. And then we would go to Zambia and lead teams for 2 weeks at a time. And so just like this whiplash. But I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much I don't know, and so much that I really need to be freed from. And so yeah, worked through all that one weird hidden relationship. That guy almost tried to commit suicide. So that just became a huge fear of me, of like, any guy I was going to date was just going to kill himself. And I was like, what is going on? But that trip, yeah, was really radical. Really, really got just discipled. And then when I came home from that, I met a girl named Julia, and she was dating Austin, and she was like, would you ever want to move to Charleston? And I was like, let me ask the Lord. Ask the Lord, because I was kind of getting tired of Idaho. Though I'm like, okay, Lord, I see what you did in it. I don't think this place is for me. And so he said yes to Charleston. Not like the happiest for my parents, but yeah, packed up my stuff in 2022 of January. And moved out here. And she was the only person I knew. And me and her barely knew each other. So it was so God ordained. Because I was literally moving across the country. So I moved, came to Charleston. My first year in Charleston was lonely. But like it was... So when when me and her moved together, she was getting engaged in March and was going to be married by October. But we signed a whole yearly, so January. And my parents were like, what are you going to do like after she's married? And I was like, God said yes, so I think he'll figure it out after that. But we became like best friends, and they, like her and Austin, like they just became a home to me and have been since. And so when they got married, like was one of their maid of honors. And after that, I was like, so like what now, Lord? Because I wasn't working for AFM, is the organization I work for now. I wasn't working for them. I was just going on a bunch of their trips and like leading teams with them. But I was like, she's married. And literally I only knew her, Austin, and this guy named Gabe. It was the 4 of us and we were inseparable. But like obviously when 2 of them get married, Gabe and I are like, all right, well, we can't do everything together. So what are we going to do? And that's when I would come to a Seacoast young adult ministry like night. Did not love it. Just felt like people were really fake and people weren't the nicest, like girl wise. Guys were really nice, but I think a little over too nice. And so when I went into that, I didn't go back for another year. And I was like, I'm good. And went into the search to find a church, because I really wanted to be plugged into church. I hadn't been plugged into a church for a long time. And like, I really missed the years of like when I lived in California. I really loved my church, and the Lord just was like, find a church. And that's when in that season, like when ministry, I think, becomes your job, it's so easy to be like, I don't need the body. Or you choose the body you get to be a part of. But the Lord just made it really clear from the start that Seacoast was it. And I was really mad about it. I was like, I'm good. No, thank you. And I would honestly fight it for a good bit. But I took the time, I even served, and it just like didn't fit. And so I left. But I felt like I kept asking, like, okay, somewhere else. And he was like, I told you. So like, I don't know what you want me to say. And it literally wasn't until last year, when I went last year to Africa, I led an 8-week team. So I was with them day in and day out. And we traveled to a bunch of different places. And in loving the same consistent people, the Lord really started like just burdening my heart of like, I think the place I always thought is like, I'm going to go out and evangelize in Africa and like live there and be in the bushes of Africa and like just raise my kids there. The Lord really started just pulling my heart for the American church and how much I really loved the discipleship of the teams coming to us. Not even a lot of the times like the Africans, I loved it. But like, so when I came home that time around last summer, I just was like, I know that's where you have me. And I think if I keep fighting, I'm like really missing something. So I went to a young adult event again. And I was like, and at that point, like it had been a year or so since I'd been. And I went to Stephen, who's our young adult pastor. And I just told him, I said, I'm here to help you. I don't know what you need, but like I am here to help. And I think one of the things I did really want to shift was the atmosphere with the women there I feel like in having discernment, it was such a pretty and perfect and put together place with really, really, really broken people. And I could see it. And so I was like, let's talk about it. Like, you guys don't have it together. And I think that's something West Coast people, everybody's business is everybody's business. Like, no one's really going to hide. People want to be more unique there and different. Where I think here, everyone wants to fit in the bubble, really appear really perfect and put together. And don't fit that bubble. I think it's like the West Coast influence, but I've never been the girly girl of like in these dresses and all these things. And so I feel like because I could see the brokenness, I was like, I told Steven, I just was like, I want to do something about it. If like they're coming to church, then like, why not actually allow change to happen here, not just in like an event, you know? And so yeah, got really plugged in, got really connected, which then would lead me to get connected into other areas of the church, which that's how I met you. And friendship has been really sweet with getting to know people. But like I said, I think I am a really honest person, but I am also really like joyful. So I think there are times that like who I am can be spoken for me before I actually get a chance to like tell people who I am. So I know for a fact there's been certain people who just were like, had made me ever feel like, oh, I think she's a little shallow just because I could be friends with everyone and I love to serve everywhere. But like I try to keep my circle a lot smaller than like what it appears. But I think the thing that I do love about Seacoast is, and just I think the American church in general, a place that ministry and missions, it just like over and over again, I would come home and people would have more of a disdain for the American church. I felt like the Lord was like actually causing me to love it. And I realized how many lost people and even people in the middle who are still figuring out the Lord, how like spiritual people have left those people. Cause like once you get to a point, I think it's just like, and I get it. And now being really involved with young adult ministry, you're talking to people who have all these sins and you're just kind of like, let it go then. And they're like, I'll just let it go like next week. And you get tired 100%. But I just realized, I think the Lord's just like, I want you to love them. Like those are the people I've called to love. And it's been really awesome to get mentors and people who've loved me and poured into me. But I think it has been a place that like, I really do want to change it for our generation. Cause me and you have talked about this often of just like, for scripture to come back and it to be real and it not to just be an emotional performance. Cause I think that's so easy to do. And in us being a part of a young adult ministry that like a ton of people come to it, but live a whole different life the other days, there can definitely be a frustration. But I think it's that balance of like, we need to be people that yes, love them and love them well, but you do have to call it out. And like, if you're going to claim something, then you got to live it. Mm. And if you're, so I think I'm still trying to figure out that balance. Cause I am such a girl who's just like, get it together. But yeah, now I think, and just even what I get to do now is just being in full-time ministry, serving a ton. It is a season I'm asking the Lord because it's feeling like, what is it? Is it Africa or is it America? And is it, and that has been the season that I am currently in because I know for the rest of my life I will be serving the Lord for my job. but yeah, what it will look like exactly, you know.
So you mentioned, you hinted at it. I wouldn't say you mentioned it,
Yeah.
but being able to meet so many people and having, more of a developed friend group, you know a lot of people,
Yeah.
but you're really close with a few.
Yeah.
And I want to ask how that has had an impact on your walk with the Lord. And in that, I know some of the people that you're in community with, and they're fantastic. Having that community that walks in obedience to the Lord, how has the Lord blessed y'all and blessed you through that obedience?
Yeah, I think it had definitely started in my community in Africa because, so the way it's run, like when you're there for 3 months, you're leading with a team and you have a leadership team and you do day in and day, like just out together, but you're leading up to 40 people at a time. And you're walking them through so much. And so then when we would go back to the leader house or like it'd just be us, that was because I used to not be a good question person. And so that's when I asked the Lord, like, I need you to be good at this because like you're spending so much time helping all these people. So then the real people you're walking in community with, because you don't have time, it's like, I want to make sure we actually talk about the things that matter. But I think in being in Africa, and one, I think when you're really walking in deep community with Jesus, friendship stops being a place that you strive in because it's like, I actually don't need you to fulfill me because that was never your purpose. But I think that's what we've made friendship. It's like, they're supposed to fulfill me. They're supposed to be my everything, but it's like, that's the Lord's business. But I also think in being in such deep relation with him, it's really hard not to love people. And I've noticed when I struggle to love people, it's probably like, how much time have I not just like read my Bible? Cause I think we could do that daily, but like actually been in deep communication with him. And so then moving here, I do have two different friend groups of like the group that I get with like my ministry and my missions people. And we've walked through like so much together of like at our age, and I'm only 24 now, of like when you're walking grown adults, there's deep things that I'm like, I don't even know how I even got here. You have to just talk to the Lord a lot through. So I think there's just an understanding that builds. And they're just deep people who do love the Lord. And so then coming here and now meeting people through church, we've not walked in such, like, I've not been stranded in the middle of nowhere, Zambia with you, and have had to just rely on each other. So like, how do we actually build it? But I think grace has been a huge thing for me of just like offering not just grace for people, but like, it's not going to be as fast paced as it is in Africa. So it could take time. And I know it took me time to even build. Cause I think at the beginning I was just friends with, maybe not the best people, but the people that were easy to be friends with, and like the people that served in all these things. And I'm just now realizing how like the substance and the depth of those people, like the Lord's just been really convicting me of that, like who my friends are. Because it really is in the church culture to serve the Lord, and the life that you live behind the scenes is just horrible. And I think because I wanted friends, I was okay to be like, oh, it's whatever. But I was like, actually, it really is not. I'd rather be lonely than hang out with some of you because you are an incredible, singer, or you're an incredible speaker, or you're incredible, whatever. But then how I see you treat people so different. But now finding those people, I think the way it has blessed me is like, one of my biggest thing is like, Lord, surround me with people that honestly love you more than I do. And obviously sometimes it could be like hard to like gauge, but I do feel like I'm with constant friendship with people that in some aspect of something teach me so much. Especially the girls in my circle who like just like really love the Lord, and like, and we have some mutuals, but like even Jocelyn's a big person for me that just like, and it's funny because I think we both would be like, you love Jesus more than I do, like, vice. But I think that's the beauty of that, is just to have sisters like that, and so many other girls and guys in my life, and even the guys that have become like genuine brothers and have loved me so well. And because of that, like, it's allowed me to have standards of what friendship should look like. But also I think because I do have that circle, knowing that if there is a girl that comes in that maybe I would not hang out with you one-on-one because your night would be like, let's go to the bars or something like that, I can bring you into my circle because I know you're going to be loved so well.
Yeah.
And that's the people I've always wanted to surround myself, is like, if I was ever to bring a complete stranger into the circle, they would see Jesus so completely. And I think that's been the beauty of like my ministry friends, but also our church friends. And I have definitely with our church friends, I think gotten more seclusive of who that looks like now and currently. But even like a few weeks ago, we had a girls' night for a friend's birthday. And I remember just looking around being like, genuinely it's girls. And it's, you know, it's like Grace and Ashlyn and Danielle and all those people just like, we don't have to be talking about the Lord. But like Jesus is so present because of how present he is in their individual lives. And I want to be around those people. And I think it also just allows me to love people so much better. Because it's like I have these friends who will like help me and walk me through things. So I actually get to love on you because of I just
you're getting poured into to then pour out. Yeah, I mean, I'll speak on your friend group a little bit. That an example of Mena's situation is I got invited over to Mena's house to hang out, which I will say she did say another guy would be there, and she lied.
And I did text you though and say he wasn't. I was like, it's all girls.
And I was like, oh crap. But later that night, I got invited to go to a game night on some girl's birthday that I had no idea who this girl was.
Didn't know a single person.
Yeah. So, but it was very welcoming and very fun, and just I felt a part of the group. And then another story is it's funny is Mena, Jocelyn, Luke, and Braden. We were all at Kickin' Chicken.
Oh my gosh.
And Luke is like one of my closest friends, and I've known him before I knew Braden, Jocelyn, or Mena for a long time. And Mena looks at me and she goes, "Look at you."
We had also not seen each other 3 months, I think.
You were on an AFM trip, but she goes, "Look at you, your friend group's leveling up." And I look at Luke and I'm like, "What the heck,
sorry,
dude?"
Luke. Well, you know what's so funny though too is because I think even when I met you, because we met December, something like that one night. I remember thinking, because I remember being like, I don't even know if they like me, because you were just so, and I think that's what I've learned so much from you specifically. I'm such a girl, because we're going to talk to like everybody, and you were so comfortable with just the people you had in your circle. But I remember thinking, I'm like, oh, he's so reserved, and he's so like to himself, and just too cool for school. But it was so, I think there was just a confidence in you of like, I have the people I have in my circle, but like I'm also going to be really strategic with those people in that circle, and because it's so smart in why you do that. And even getting to know your friends this past year, because at times that I'm like, my friend group can be so loud and crazy, and yours not so much, but I know there's aspects of it too that can. But I think that's what's been the beautiful thing about being in different friend groups is like, there's a beauty in all of it. Like, especially I think when the Lord's involved, I think you get to see how creative he is of like the people, the way he's made people. But also I think at times we can just, and I've noticed myself of like, I had just my circle and the people that made me feel safer. I felt connected to her. I felt like understood me, but I'm like, you're missing so much. If friendship for you is just a place to be understood. But I'm like, I think in the one thing I do appreciate, I think that I do have friends in different circles, and it has allowed me to just really see the uniqueness in the Lord, because I was like, wow, for so long I kept to just my circle and my community for myself, where I'm like, I'm missing a huge part about Jesus and his heart, and I think that's been one of the coolest things is even in getting to know you, is me and you're very different people, but it's been really cool because to just hear your heart and all of that and what I've learned from y'all's friendships. Yeah.
It's cool to see the diversity that the Lord has.
Literally.
Like just different culture, different.
So creative.
Yeah. But getting back on track of just like, again, you mentioned the blessing of the obedience of like, just being seen, heard, understood in different spots, but then being able to go and see, hear, and understand other people that don't have that. Now we're up to date in the present. Is there anything else that's going on now that you want to mention before we kind of highlight in the future?
I don't think so.
So going in, obviously, no idea what the Lord holds. You said you're confident that you're going to be working in ministry for the rest of your life, and serving others for the rest of your life. Do you have any like hopes or aspirations in that? Like,
I think I definitely will probably settle down more in the sense of like I am traveling often, They spend about 3 months and then a month in the winters, 3 months in the summers. Like, so almost half the year in a whole other country, which sometimes does, when you're starting to get rooted. It didn't matter a year ago because it didn't matter where I went. But now that I'm like connecting to my church, I'm connecting to people, finding roots. I'm like, it's really hard to build a relationship with someone who's gone all the time. And so I feel like that is somewhat in my near future of like, I think it's time to settle a little bit. I think the ease about, because I'm, single, it's just like my job gets to be ministry. I've never wanted to waste this season because I know it's going to go away someday. And I never want to look back on it and be like, what'd you do in that time? Just like sat around. And so I think the part I do love is in getting to serve in all the places I get to, but knowing I can't do that forever. And, but yeah, I think dream wise, I'm like, love to get married, to be a mom. And I know there'll probably be seasons where that's the mission field and that's ministry and that's going to be my calling. And that will be the day that it starts to forever. But like, I think there'll be certain seasons that's like, no, you're just at home. Which at times for me a long time ago was like, I'm like, we'll take them with us. But like knowing too, I'm like having parents who had a beautiful marriage and how just that one thing can do so much, not only for your own kids, but like how much my parents' beautiful marriage helped other people. And I think that's been a big thing of like, I've really been trying to heal and walk through so much of just within myself. One, because it's like, who knows who I'm going to be married to, and in that needing to walk that through, but also for like my kids and all of that. And also the people I get to serve and love. I'm like, I want to make sure everything I'm ever preaching or teaching or walking people through, the Lord has actually done it. That if I'm asking you to find joy in your salvation, that I find joy in my salvation. Yeah. That if I'm asking you to live a laid down life, that I've done that. And I want to do that when it's just me and the Lord. But yeah, I think those two, probably being a mom and a wife, are definitely dreams. Past that, I'm willing for it to be anything. I think, like I said, if you had asked me 4 years ago what I would do, for sure it was going to be, I was going to live either in Africa or in the Middle East, or just in a place where I could evangelize and work with women. But I think since now being here, I've just realized how lost America is, and I really love this place. And it's a place I'm not born from, but it's a place that's just become home. And young adults, like I said, that's a huge, I think, area I feel called to walk in. But like I said, I don't know. I think I've just called to people because I feel called to women. I've always weirdly felt called to marriage ministry. Not married, but just like these little things that the Lord has always like placed in my heart. And so, and I think my biggest dream probably would be like, if I was to look at my life, whether it's like in 10 years, it's like to have a home that people feel like they can always come in wherever and whoever you are. And I have a marriage that like honors the Lord, that I honor my husband, kids who honor the Lord, who feel like I honor them. And I know that's like a weird concept, but just, yeah, I think it's a life that like the Lord's like, she loves me, as when her whole attention was just me. When it was just her and I still love him that much in 10 years as I do currently, when it's like, yeah, all I get to do right now, like, I got to be at Liberty this past week and got home yesterday. And all I did the whole time is just like hear testimonies and talk about the Lord. But like I get to do that even with all the added stuff. But I do know, like I do have dreams of like I want to start things as well and start certain ministries. But like I said, sometimes I think because I'm like, I just love people. I'm like, I see a need here. I see a need here. And a huge part of my heart is also to help like the discipleship of young adults, to help them actually know where they're called to. Because I think so many more people are called to actually serve the Lord, I think, than they think they are. But it just seems like a scary thing. And also the opportunity to do it, because it's just like work at a church or like go to Africa. But I'm like, no, you could do that, I think. And you could be a doctor or a teacher. So that's just a huge part of my heart, is like, and I would love to do it with my family, like, and raise my kids in it. But yeah, so I think that's the dream, if that even is one. But
That's
I think,
awesome.
yeah, I want to be someone where the Lord is like, she's loved me continuously, whether I've added things to her life or I've taken it away. And it's not something that like, oh yeah, she reads her Bible in the morning, but it's just like, it's a daily life, whether it gets to a point, all that the Lord is like, I want you to serve is on a Sunday morning. And that's the only thing I ever do. Then yeah. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, it's been an absolute honor and joy to be able to listen to your testimony and hear how the Lord has called you into adoption, both
Literally.
in this world and the next.
Spiritually and physically.
Yeah, the servanthood, the discipleship. Just, it's awesome to hear what the Lord's doing.
Yeah, thanks for
That's the whole
having me.
goal of the testimony stuff, is just hear what the Lord's doing. So thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Any last words?
No, Jesus loves you. And go share the gospel with someone new this week. That's it.
All right. Deuces.
Peace out.